All right. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Hopefully, everyone is in the right room. But today we are talking about building bridges and leveraging external partnerships to strengthen STEM scholar success. So, welcome. I want to remind you that you can use the chat box to ask any questions that you might have, but there will be a time for Q&A. But in the meantime, feel free to introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, and what you're most excited about today. So I'll do some good housekeeping rules. This webinar will be recorded and it will be archived and made available to people online. So at the end of this session, there will be a short survey. Please fill that out and give us some feedback on how you like this. For today, we are wanting to equip STEM community with practical strategies to identify and launch external partnerships across the industry, community organizations, and professional networks that expand scholar identification, create impact opportunities, which includes internships, mentorship opportunities, research, professional development, and sustain these long-term goal-aligned collaborations while ensuring that we foster our community of knowledge sharing and across programs. So before we go into that agenda, I want to give y'all a short overview of what we're all about. The NSF STEM program's aim is to increase the success of low-income, academically talented students with demonstrated financial need who are pursuing degrees in STEM fields. So this STEM builds a stronger STEM force while also fostering innovation across the nation. Today's session is hosted by the STEM Resource and Evaluation Center, which is known to us as the REC for short. The STEM REC was established in 2022 through a competitive NSF proposal process, and it is run by the American Association for the Advancement of Science in collaboration with partner organizations like us, which is QEM Network. The REC supports capacity building of STEM project leaders and scholars, as well as synthesizes the outcomes of STEM projects nationwide. We also work to build community and share effective practices and strategies across the STEM network. We encourage you to explore our website at stemrec.AAAS.org for more details. Okay, so now here's the fun part. If you're anything like me, you're going to hate this. But if you're not like me, you might love this. So we're going to try to do this thing where we take our camera off and operate with a show and tell. We have like a few minutes to discuss an item that's within arm's reach that represents our collaboration style. And I might ask a few people to share. What are y'all's thoughts on getting started? And I can go first. So I'm not home for this background. So this is just some random item I found around my room with my mom. But it says, to accomplish great things, we must not only act, but also dream. Not only plan, but also believe. And for me, that speaks to my collaborations in a way of like, I try to have a plan when I go to conferences, or there's people that I'm watching when I'm looking at their work that they produce. So I act on that. I'll try to introduce myself to people as much as possible, but I also know that the right energy will be at the right time in the right place. And a lot of the times the universe allows us to align that way. So my partnerships are very organic in a way of like, if I'm meeting someone at a conference, I try to get to know them. And if we see that we vibe well, hey, let's see what else we can do together and let's expand that. So that's me. Would anyone else like to share something about something on their desk or something around them that helps them think about their partnerships in the way that they partner with other people in this field and wonderful space that we're working in? And I'm going through, see if anyone's off camera, but if you do come off camera, feel free to unmute and just start talking and talking about your item.
Thanks, Taylor. I'll go ahead and this is kind of off the cuff, but I have a book called The Chaos Machine, which is a book that a group of colleagues and I are reading together as part of a book club that we started. Um, and we started this primarily because we wanted to like build a stronger community and bond together, as well as just have an opportunity and excuse to read something that's a little bit out of our normal, like discipline. Um, and so, yeah, I guess what this symbolizes for me is that when we're thinking about partnerships, it's not just focused on the specific task that maybe brought us together, but also like on forming relationships and thinking about how we can bond together. So.
I love that. And I love the name, the Chaos Machine. And then you also love group structured reading. It's my favorite thing to do. I'm currently reading The Alchemist with my mom to try to understand that. So I love that's a wonderful way to bond. So thank you for sharing, Rachel. I was gonna say, panelists, you are also welcome. So Reed, if you have an item that you want to share. Oh, I see David has his hand up too. Feel free to unmute.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm David Atley from the Community College of Aurora in Aurora, Colorado. Also completely off the cuff here. My dean actually a little while ago got me this. This is a no button. My collaboration style is I almost always hear things I get excited about and like I want to always say yes. And so this is here to remind me sometimes it's important to say no so that the things that we're doing are strategic and that they're aligned with goals. So that is something that I always have struggled with and want to continue to do better about. But being here in this room, one of the reasons I'm here is that I want to make sure that we're strategically aligning what we're doing locally with the workforce needs of our students. So.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing, David. No is very important with alignment. So thank you for emphasizing that because I think we always hear about the year of yes, but sometimes when you say yes to many things, like you're in out of alignment. So thank you for sharing. I saw Sarah's hand up.
Yeah, hi, I'm Sarah Johnson. I'm at Moravian University in Eastern Pennsylvania. So what I grabbed is the book Ada Twist Scientist. It reflects collaboration in two ways. So first of all, one of my main research areas right now is looking at gender and racial science bias with a collaborator, and we collaborate very integratively. So we problem solve together a lot. Like I tend to work best when collaboration is not like delegation and everybody working separately, but like really problem solving together. And then the book that we're reading basically oodles and oodles of books about scientists, children's books about pictures, books about scientists, and then Ada Twist, if you're not familiar, it's very collaborative problem solving, so it kind of reflects that as well. And my STEM group, I really am glad to say we're all very collaborative and we work together to problem solve. So that's it.
Thank you so much for sharing. Y'all are making me want to write down all the books y'all are talking about, and we can create a good book list for the rec. So thank you so much. I saw another hand. Lalita, make sure I said that right. If
Yes,
not,
yes, you said it right.
okay.
So this is Lalita from California State University at Fresno or Fresno State. My collaboration style is I don't have any fancy item. I just had this small little tiny thing my student gave me. So she was so inspired. She was I was explaining some things to her, and then thanks for listening, because she was little older in age, and then she started very late. She had her bachelor's degree. She was doing master's degree with me. But bachelor's degree was in mechanical engineering and I'm in civil engineering. So, we had to go through a lot of things together. But then my collaboration style essentially is I like to collaborate with anybody and everybody. And I always find some connections. I'm also a Gallup coach. So connectedness is one of my strengths there. So I always find something to work on, no matter whatever your background is. And I use that all the time with my students. So I have students from civil, electrical, mechanical, all kinds of students I collaborate with. Even my colleagues on our STEM grant, they are from everywhere. They are from mechanical, electrical, the PI is from electrical engineering. And I collaborate. I love collaborations, all kinds of things. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing. We might need you to come speak at one of our next webinars, so we'll keep that in mind. So thank you for being an expert in this space. We look forward to hearing from you during this webinar as well. So thank you all for all the ones that were able to share. If not, feel free to communicate in the chat. Once again, please let us know where you're from, introduce yourself, and just engage with us as much as we can in this next hour. Next, I'll pass it on to my wonderful colleague, Mercy Mugo.
Thank you, Taylor, for guiding us through that opening session. It's interesting and always an eye-opening to hear about people's approaches to partnership and what our experiences are. So as Taylor mentioned, on this session, we are going to be hearing from our speaker. And just so I can introduce myself, I'm Mercy Mugo. I'm the Executive Director at QM Detour. QM is one of the partners on the AAAS STEM Resource and Evaluation Center. And so we have two speakers this afternoon, and they'll be discussing how strategic collaborations with other institutions of higher education, as well as industry partners, can strengthen scholar identification and create meaningful engagement opportunities for the students. They can then support their long-term career pathways. Both speakers have read or are currently leading an STEM project, and they'll share some of the lessons learned about developing, sustaining, and leveraging external partnerships. So I'll do a quick introduction of our two speakers. First, we have Dr. Rachel Funk, who is a postdoctoral faculty member for the Department of Mathematics and the Center for Science, Mathematics, and Computer Education at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Her research interest includes partnerships to support STEM student success, student-instructor partnerships in mathematics to support equity, and STEM teacher development and learning. Dr. Funk served as a project manager and researcher for the STEM track-through project called STEM Connect, which concluded in fall 2025. The STEM Connect represented a strong partnership among the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, Southeast Community College, and Western Nebraska Community College to support students in STEM with interest in mathematics and computing intensive careers. And I'll share more information about this project in the chat so that you can learn more about STEM Connect as she will be speaking about it. Our next speaker is Dr. Reed Parkins, who is a professor of environmental studies at North Central College. He received his AB in philosophy and master's in resource policy from the University of Michigan. He also has a PhD in forestry hydrology from Oregon State University. He has served as a co-chair for the AAAS Project Kaleidoscope, STEM Leadership Institutes, and his recent work focuses on improving equity and access in undergraduate STEM programs. He is currently a PI for the NSF-funded Leadership Experience and Advancement Program in STEM, LEAPS. And again, I'll share more information about the LEAPS program in the chat. So at this point, I would like to welcome Dr. Funk. And just so that each one of them will provide an overview of the STEM project so that we can better understand their programs and the perspective from which they'll be sharing their insights. And again, as Taylor mentioned, please feel free to submit any questions you have in the chat. While we have a dedicated time for Q&A at the end, we can take questions as we go. So at this point, Rachel, please introduce your program and tell us more about your recently concluded STEM project.
Sure. Thank you, Mercy, for the introduction, and thank you, QEM and AAAS and the REC for hosting this panel and inviting me. So as Mercy mentioned, I was a part of the STEM Connect Track 3 grant that ended recently. Our major partnership was the partnership that we had among the two community colleges who were involved. So Southeast Community College, which is also in the Lincoln area, and Western Nebraska Community College, which is about 5 hours east from Lincoln and Scottsbluff. While we focused on math and computing, we had different eligibility requirements depending upon where our scholars originated from. So at UNL, eligibility was restricted to students who majored in computer science, computer engineering, math, or software engineering, or STEM Connect scholars who transferred from a community college partner. So because Nebraska community colleges don't specify majors for students in their academic transfer programs, our Southeast Community College and Western Nebraska Community College partners accepted applications from any student whose academic program was focused on a STEM discipline, and in early stages who had an intention to transfer, although that changed later on in our grant, which I can talk about a bit later. So as part of the partnership, the UNL team guaranteed a STEM Connect scholarship to any student who joined the program at our community college partner and transferred into UNL with good academic standing. As for our target population, so we focused our efforts on recruiting women, underrepresented minorities in STEM, rural students, and first-generation students. We didn't have any external partners formally beyond an evaluator, as well as the partnership that we had amongst the three institutions. But we did form like several informal partnerships across the life of the grant with local like industries and companies around our institutions who would regularly provide resources in terms of speakers to our seminars, hosted industry site visits, offered mentorship for our students, etc. So, yeah.
Thank you, Rachel. Reed?
Yeah, and hi everybody. Thanks to you for taking the time on a busy day to spend listening to us, and hopefully we'll get some ideas from you too. I feel a little bit of imposter syndrome, pretending to be an expert on this topic because I'm learning just as you all are about how to manage an STEM grant, how to make it work, how to do all the things that I said we were going to do back in the proposal. It all seems so simple when you write this stuff down and then you start doing it and you realize it's not so simple. But I'm the PI of a Track 1 STEM grant, 6 years. It's under solicitation 22, 567 or 527, I think, a few years ago. So at that point, the budget was limited to $750,000. Had we known that what the current budget is for a Track 1, which is $2 million, we probably would have waited a couple of years to submit, but such is life. We're in year 4. The school where I am, North Central College, is in the western suburbs of Chicago. We're a primarily undergraduate institution. We're 40% first gen. Our partners in this work are 2 community colleges, Triton College and College of DuPage. College of DuPage is several times larger, as a lot of community colleges are, several times larger than our school. We have about 2,500 students. So my experience in this is really born from being a small fish surrounded by much bigger fish with different objectives, different priorities in their institutional structures. So it's I don't have the privilege, and I don't want to speak for UNL, but I don't have the privilege of having people know my institution when I call them up. There's a lot of explaining, there's a lot of justifying, there's a lot of validation that has to happen before we can get to the point of saying, will you partner with us in this project? But our target population is transfer students. So we presented an argument to NSF that we would help transition students primarily from 2-year schools, again, the community colleges around us, into a 4-year undergraduate experience. And easier said than done, of course, but that's in order to make that happen, we knew we needed to partner with the community colleges to ease that transition because research shows clearly that the transition process starts way before the student even begins to think about applying for the transfer at the destination school. And that's what I'm going to be offering about a little bit today. I'm also going to make a point, I'll just foreshadow a little bit about the value of internal partnerships as a facilitation technique for external partnerships. And I think I'm sensitive to that as being at a small school. I have no slack in my rope. I have very, very little extra resources that I can allocate. So I have to maximize every resource that I do have, and that absolutely includes the internal partners too. And I always get nervous when I start talking. You know, as faculty, you're programmed to speak for 50 minutes or an hour and 15 at a time. So I'll stop there and we'll just jump into the questions, I think.
Yeah, you're good. You're doing well. And thanks for bringing the value of the internal partnerships. And during our fall session, we focused on that, but it's also, we know that it's always good to leverage those internal partnerships because they may also introduce you to some external partners that you are not aware of. So that's
Absolutely.
always
Yeah.
important. And Tara will be sharing also the link to our fall session where we brought a panel that was talking about those campus units and how they have been able to rely on those to support the STEM program. And now, Reed, if you can maybe answer the next question, which is, how did you initially identify and approach, the partners that you have, and what made that partnership a good fit for your STEM project goals?
Yeah, we start, of course, I think all of us have to start with the STEM goals. And I've been on probably at least STEM review panels at NSF. So I've read, I don't even know, multiply that up by 10 or 12, and maybe you have as well. All of us have the same goals, right? So we're going to increase recruitment, improve retention, persistence, graduation, and prepare as David said, prepare our students for post-graduation success in a STEM career. So that's the baseline. How do we choose our partners? We chose partners on the three basic priorities. Number one, they had to be local and regional. We had to be able to see them frequently and face to face, or we wanted to at least. Number two, they had to have some pre-existing priority on students or interns if it's a company. And number three, their enthusiasm to participate. So we identified a lot of partners that we thought would be perfect, but they did not reciprocate our love. And so even though we thought they were perfect, we ended up going with ones that were maybe less perfect, but demonstrated more enthusiasm. If a partner doesn't want to be your partner, don't have them as a partner. We learned that. Yeah, most people have already learned that, but I mean, we knew that going in. So we chose partners who demonstrated a clear, I call it enthusiasm or willingness to commit, and that came across in our initial conversations by how many people showed up at the meeting. How many questions did they ask? Did they talk amongst themselves in a spontaneous way about it, or were they very passive? So we kind of read the room, to be honest with you, and said which community colleges might be willing to meet with us and continue with us on the project. So that's how we did it.
Thank you. Very important to identify and work with partners who you're on the same goal and they're passionate about the work. Rachel, do you have anything to add about your process for identifying the partners?
So full disclosure, I did not start on the STEM Connect grant until a year in. So I'm a little bit murkier on how like the original partnership formed. Other than to highlight what Reed was discussing and what you just summarized, Mercy, that it's really important to have common goals and for folks to be enthusiastic about achieving that goal. We also, and this will kind of be a theme in what I discussed today, we also had like prior connections to at least the PI for Southeast Community College, who was the department chair at the time of the math department. He had graduated from UNL's math department. And so we had that like pre-existing relationship and had already built like some trust amongst
Yeah.
One another. And so that, go with the people that you trust and care about. So we definitely leveraged that connection. And we continued to leverage that. So as an example, another graduate from UNL went on to work at NASA, and she spoke to our scholars at least 3 different times across the life of the project. She also was a first generation student, and so she could speak to that. And that was something that we prioritized as well whenever we try to make contacts in industry, is hearing from folks who had stories of success and who also shared similar backgrounds or identities to our students.
Yeah, very important. Thank you for leveraging also existing partnerships. So what specific benefits have these partnerships created for your STEM scholars, and which have had like the greatest impact? I know, Rachel, when you started, you were talking about like mentorship and internship opportunities. So what are some of those benefits that have been able to come to your scholars, or the scholars are able to benefit from those type of partnerships that you have?
Sure. So at start of the grant, we had built in um, or said that we were going to have mentorships, a faculty mentor, which I think is a requirement of the program, peer mentorships we had also built in. Something that we offered to students sort of later in the grant was an industry mentor. There were actually far fewer students who took us up on this opportunity than we anticipated. I think in part because many of our students at UNL were engineering majors and already had some like industry connections they were making through their capstone course project. But we had a few math majors request an industry mentor. Um, and that was impactful for them. So, in order to identify mentors, again, we relied heavily on contacting prior graduates in the area who were working in industries that might be of interest to our students. So, really like building off that alumni network. And this was like the same group of folks that we invited to seminars who were able to help us make connections to other people in industry who might be good people to invite to seminars and panels. So really, our seminars were one of the primary tools we used to make an impact in terms of exposing students to different career opportunities and supporting their like sense of belonging or sense that they could succeed in their discipline. As I mentioned before, we tried to recruit speakers who could speak to the experience of being um, of being first generation or an underrepresented minority or gender in STEM. And this was really helpful for our scholars. And this was kind of reinforced later on as we had folks graduate from the program. We would frequently invite them back to serve as a panel to talk about what they've been doing. And that was really valuable for scholars to be able to see how their peers or other people in the program had succeeded. And I can talk more about like logistics of seminars if that would be helpful. I will say that it's not like we had all of these industry connections right off the bat. Some of it was like cold emailing or cold calling folks around the area to see like who would be willing to host us for site visits or come speak to our scholars. And really, almost any time that we reached out, that we got a really positive response. So we tried to have like an industry site visit at least once per semester, and that was fairly successful. Um, yeah, and we did a number of things, I think, to with the goal of supporting students and getting exposure to a variety of different companies, local companies in STEM. Um, Another thing that I will mention, and this maybe doesn't necessarily speak to external partnerships with like industry folks, but kind of speaks to the partnership across the campuses. So one thing that we tried to do and emphasized, I think, towards the later end of the grant was we tried to have seminars that were like across the three campuses as much as possible. Unfortunately, because of that geographical distance with Western Nebraska, often it ended up being UNL and SEC pairing up for seminars more so than Western. But these were really helpful for building a community amongst our scholars so that transfer students or those who were interested in transferring from Southeast Community College could ask questions and start to like form partnerships with other students at UNL. So this was a great way for them to bond. And I think one other thing that I will mention is this is kind of an internal partnership, but one of our co-PIs had been running a robotics lab on campus and had an REU that we were able to plug into early on. So she was able to reserve some spots in her REU for our STEM Connect scholars. And this was like a fantastic opportunity for scholars across our campuses to be able to get some exposure to research for folks who maybe were interested in transferring to UNL to like come to the campus early and make that connection prior to transfer. So that was hugely successful.
Thanks, Rachel. I hear a lot of partnership and leveraging a lot of opportunities, whether it's within your campus, across the institution in the program, and as well as the industry partners. I also liked when you mentioned about selecting speakers who have similar lived experiences as the students so that the student can see themselves and see how, their trajectory could be. So thanks for sharing that as well. Dee, do you have anything to add about what are some of those benefits that the scholars have been able to get from the external partnership, and which one of those have had the greatest impact?
Yeah, so I'll try to answer that question from the scholars or students' perspective, if I can. And it's a bit of a surprise for the senior leadership on my project. One of the most impactful benefits of having these collaborations, both internal and external, is the peeling back of the curtain for how science and STEM actually works. It's the idea that uh, changing the students or scholars' perspective from how do you master the material in a class to how do you form collaborative relationships to investigate a problem or to achieve a goal. And that change in mindset, I think I won't call it transformative. That's probably over the top, but at least eye-opening for our scholars that their role as a student goes beyond just the test on Friday or the final at the end of the semester. They're there in our college environment as a transition to something bigger, bolder, and better maybe. And that was seeing that change in appreciation, especially for the 2-year students coming in. 2-year students, in my experience, coming into where I teach, um, very much focused on graduating early and graduating with minimal debt. So not necessarily a transactional environment, but very focus driven. They're success driven, trying to complete the task. What we have tried to do through our external partnerships is to slow them down a bit and say, while you're here, realize that there's a larger context, a larger landscape of STEM that you're preparing yourself for. And you can think about career opportunities in a way that you hadn't thought of before. And rather than just saying, I'm going to get a job in X when I graduate, let's go talk to a person who works in that field right now and see if that's still a good fit for you after having had that conversation. So I think just to circle back and close it off, one of the real key benefits for our students is the idea that STEM exists beyond the classroom setting, beyond even the lab setting, but in a professional context where relationships are the currency of the realm, right? It's not just who you know and what you know. It's how do you interact with that person? How do you interact in that environment that then transitions the student to whatever they're going to do after graduation?
Very good point. There's a question in the chat that I think is timely to answer. It's about if you've had issues paying for maybe, lunch or meeting with
Yeah.
alumni or industry partners. Has any one of you had this, limitation or challenge?
I'll go into that. So in my case, the dean paid for it out of the indirects. So this gets into sort of and if we're all PIs and we're past the point, but I mean, I was going to say pre-submission conversation about if your school has indirects, how might those be prioritized? And do you as a PI have a special request that you can give to the dean or the provost or the department chair to say, even though the money is yours, is it acceptable if I peel some of that back and support a lunch? Indirects there's no limits on what you can spend indirects on. So that's how we manage that. You can't typically can't, there's always exceptions, but you can't spend your STEM budget on it, but you can spend your indirects on it. So that's what we did. And eat cheap. Don't go to the steakhouse.
We did, in our original budget, plan for site visits and build that into the budget. For example, Western Nebraska had built in a site visit to be able to visit UNL as well as they're close to like Colorado State and other institutions that students would potentially be interested in transferring to. And we also, I mean, anytime that we used funds for meals, it was always associated with like a meeting. We had a very clear agenda of what we wanted to accomplish. And that was built into our original budget. that doesn't necessarily address the existing issue that you're having, Lolita. I will say that we did, speaking of, Reed had shared that, you write something into a grant and then things happen, maybe not as you were planning them. We had, towards the end stages of the grant, a lot of different conversations about how we could use or reallocate funds that weren't going to particular things that we anticipated them going towards. And so that involved a lot of conversations amongst the three partners in terms of what goals we had in ways in terms of how we wanted to support students or how we wanted to support partnerships among community colleges and University of Nebraska. And it also involved a lot of conversations with the program officer. So whenever our PI was uncertain about how we wanted to allocate funds, he would send an email to the program officer and have that conversation.
Lalita, you had a question?
Sorry, it's related to that. But I was also wondering if you have any insights on how to reallocate, like how that process goes, because our foundation keeps on telling us that we cannot reallocate our funds. And does NSF allow that? Like, what is it?
You'll need to communicate with your PO for sure on that.
Okay.
All of us are under the 60% rule of all of
Oh,
our
yeah, of
right?
course.
So there are
Yeah.
limits. But outside the scholarship amounts, and I don't want to pretend to act like I know more than I do, but outside the scholarship, there is a lot more flexibility about how the funds are allocated. Inside the scholarship line, you have zero flexibility.
Yeah,
And so then the
no,
question
yeah,
is,
correct.
what happens if you are under that 60% threshold? In other words, you have not met that standard and you do want to reallocate. And then if you allocate funds outside, that were non-scholarship funds, if you really reallocate those, you're probably going to drop your percentage even more. So, and bottom line, talk to the PO about what's allowed and what's not.
Yeah, likewise. I don't want to claim to have the best knowledge of the PAPPG, but you should not be moving funds away from participant support. Like that's
No, that is
big no.
that is
Yeah.
we know.
Yeah.
That of course nobody's touching, but there are some, as I said, we were not able to use the monies allocated for, travel and all those things because of these restrictions. So we were trying to maybe allocate it to some certain professional development activities for students, like purchasing some, some kind of books or some codes for, like say Microsoft provides Excel and all those trainings. So something like that, which also adds to their professional development. So that's what we were thinking to do, to reallocate that money for students because it is meant for students.
Yes, and I shared a matrix that a program officer shared last month in one of the session about what they can be waived, what can be approved. For sure, participants' cost, you have to go through the program officer, but it does give like a guideline of, what can you do without going through the PO. So you can review that at your own time, but it's the link is in the chat. And thanks for your question. That's a really good question. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, Rachel. So how did your partnership strategies evolve as your project moved from early implementation to a more mature phase? And I know you're done, so I'm assuming that, how you started with the partnership is not how you ended in some cases. So what are there some changes that happened and how did it evolve?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll kind of just briefly talk about how this was a 6-year grant, so needs of the partnership changed throughout those 6 years. There was a lot of coordination, obviously, early on in the grant as they were ramping up recruitment. But then in years 2 and 3, the partnership primarily met like once a semester to talk about common goals and how things were going. The local leadership teams would generally meet more frequently, at least once a month. But we found that this structure wasn't really sustainable in later years of the grant for a variety of reasons. For example, figuring out what to do with the budget when things that were not going as planned. Budget fluctuations were high, and so we found that we needed to have more conversations about how we wanted to use those funds. And so that required more frequent meetings. So that was something that definitely like kind of shifted over the course of the project, is how frequently to be meeting with the partner institutions. Um, I think something else that was emphasized in later years was really the importance or value of collaboration across the three institutions. So, for example, we ended up organizing a lot more co-institutional seminar activities as we went further along in the grant. Um, we got better about coordinating activities for scholars, going from roughly like one joint seminar each semester to 3 to 4 per semester towards the end of the grant, at least between UNL and Southeast Community College. Um, we also we were using our funds to support shared goals. We needed to like have conversations about how we were going to use those funds that originally, were supposed to go towards like personnel or other areas, and it just didn't happen. And so we had to have more conversations as a result of that. One of the things that we did one summer is we funded a curriculum development retreat. We invited all community colleges in Nebraska, as well as each University of Nebraska institution, to hopefully like support the partnership that we had started with STEM Connect, but also expand that partnership. The goal of that retreat was very similar to the goals of STEM Connect. It was to support transfer students, bettering that process for students, and also to uh, make sure that there was a transparent conversation that was happening among two-year colleges and four-year colleges. So all that is to say that like the partnership is going to evolve throughout the life of a grant. I'll talk a little bit. I know there's a question about challenges. I can talk a bit more about like turnover of personnel later on when we get to that. But yeah, I think I'll go ahead and turn it over to Reed now.
Mercy, did you want to interject or just want me to plow ahead? You're on mute, by the way.
Sorry, yeah, I would also want to hear your perspective about how the partnerships evolved over time for your project.
Yeah. Just really quickly, the evolution of the partnerships started with a condition that we thought they would all be the same. And I think the evolution reflected the fact that they weren't the same. And in one institution, we had a junior faculty member who volunteered to be the liaison and the champion of our project at his school. In the other community college, that person turned out to be a department chair of science. So very different organizational positions led to very different communication strategies on my end, to be honest with you. Working with the junior faculty without the social administrative clout versus working with a chair who can, with a phone call, make things roll. Recognizing that as step one, navigating it as step two. And so step three was actually how do we get from the faculty positions, which were much more apples to apples from where I am and where the senior leadership of the project is, to academic advisors. So the community colleges were really trying to generate student interest in our project. We realized pretty quickly that faculty have limited ability to do that, and the real power broker in that dynamic is the academic advisors for the STEM students. So long story short, over the 4 years, we've realized the institutional structures really impact how my project then communicates. So rather than having one strategy, now we have multiple strategies that we have to employ. So it becomes much more complicated. And this is why, as we all learn, if we're all PIs here, we all learn that it's a lot more difficult to implement a project than it is to propose one, because suddenly things fracture and chaos theory holds and everything becomes an individual case rather than one unified situation that you can apply a single solution to.
Yeah, yeah. What you plan sometimes does not end up being what you get to have for
That's right.
Implementation phase. Yes.
That's right. You go ahead, Mercy.
No,
I
go
know we're
ahead.
short. No, I'm just going to make an analogy. So, jumping into the river blindfolded, trying to figure out how to avoid the rocks. And sometimes you do it, sometimes you don't. So,
Yeah. I was going to say, if anyone has a question, they can come off mute and ask. I know we have like two more questions, but I want to make sure that we are answering questions as we go. So feel free to either submit your question in the chat or raise your hand so we can give you an opportunity to ask the panelists any questions you may have. The next question is on the practices. What practices have helped you maintain those, strong long-term relationship with the partners, rather than those one-off engagements that sometimes happen when partnerships do not work?
You want me to jump in on that, Mercy?
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
Yeah. So for me, I thought about this, and there are three key things that I do fairly well. I think one is to make the relationship points of connection, make them frequent, make them gentle, and make them reciprocal. So frequency allows you to navigate any changes in current. If I can continue that metaphor, so it's going to fall apart, but. So having frequent points of contact allows you to recognize when their institutional priorities shift away from your project, either temporarily or maybe strategically if they're moving in a different direction. The gentle part is to not have every conversation focus on a request. Have your conversations focus on what they want, or something. Maybe there's an event on campus that you think your partner or your main counterpart might be interested in, or share some good news. Hey, all of our STEM scholars graduated, or something. Just anything beyond just, hey, I need a letter from you that says you're willing to do this. Something that's positive and maybe not directly related to the project. And number three, and I think Rachel hit on this earlier, but to make the relationship reciprocal. So if all you're doing is taking, if all you're doing is asking, that's a recipe for disaster. What can you bring to their situation? Can you be a guest speaker? Can you offer your lab expertise in an experiment? Can you co-write something that could be published, which is huge in the community college environment to have a public, because as many of you are two-year school folks, free time is not something we have a lot of. And I think two-year school folks have even less than four-year school folks. That's just a impression. So what can you bring to that situation that helps them? Where's the value added for them from the relationship? And so make the interactions or connections frequent, gentle, and reciprocal, I think is how we've developed a strategy for nurturing the partnership.
Super awesome. I can't summarize this better than you, Rachel. You have anything else to add?
Yeah, I don't know if I really need to follow up to that. That was a great answer. I think I'll just reemphasize that reciprocity, and also, yeah, recognizing that there are differences in resources across your partnership. So coming from the perspective of an institution that had a lot of resources, I think it was important for us to make sure that we were providing like administrative support as much as possible. For example, we took care of like recruitment flyers, obviously like asking for input from our partners, but trying to relieve some of that burden, which we know there is a lot of labor involved in running an STEM grant. And so if your partner institution doesn't have as many resources as you do, I think that's important to recognize.
And I'll build on that by circling back to the notion of internal partners. If you're working with internal partners, I think all of us work with financial aid, admissions, etc. It is so nice if you can give a shout out to them at a public forum or a campus forum and just recognize their contribution. If you can write an unsolicited thank you and then copy the dean and the provost and the president, that scratches everyone's back because it obviously puts your project back in the mindset of the dean and then provost and the president, but it also throws a light of appreciation on your internal partners who aren't getting paid for this. So they're not getting anything. They're probably not even getting the free lunch out of this thing. And you're asking them to change what they're doing, adding additional burdens on them that they're wondering why did I agree to do this? But it's critical to your STEM, right? If you don't have financial aid and missions on board, you're dead in the water. And so you're asking them to do extra things, give them some internal recognition and appreciation. But I say that, and it seems common sense, but most projects, at least I shouldn't say this out loud, but most projects in my school don't do that. So,
thank you. Again, it's time for Q&A. If there is no Q&A, I can ask the next question. So I'll just pause to see if anybody has a question before we continue. All right, I think that was a long of a pause. So the next question is, what challenges have you encountered in those, building and managing those partnership? And what would you do differently if you had to start again? I can start with Rachel.
Okay. So I'll share a bit about challenges related to logistics. So UNL is a Microsoft campus. We use SharePoint. This makes it really challenging to share project documentation, which has a negative impact on partnerships. So if I were to do things differently, if we were to start our project again, I would try to make things feel or be less UNL centric, probably start with Google Drive or something that was more easily accessible across the three institutions. So that's one thing, is to think about what are like the structures you're using to communicate, and is that supporting your goals for your partnership? Similar or related to that, things like how thinking intentionally about how you're creating agendas. So our agendas, at least uh, from my perspective, were very much so like kind of a top-down approach. So the PI would kind of create the agenda in advance and ask for my input, and then we would send it out to folks. And I think a part of that rationale was to try to make project meetings as efficient as possible, since we understood that folks who were involved were spending significantly more time on the project than the monetary compensation they were getting from the project. So we were trying to value people's time, but I think that also had the impact of sort of devaluing the value in making like a collaborative agenda, right? So, I mean, we did have space for folks to add like discussion items, but moving forward, like if we have another STEM grant, I would want that to be more collaborative than it was. I think also a challenge that is something that's kind of unavoidable is turnover in the grant. So we had a PI at one of our institutions who took an indefinite leave like right at the start of our grant, and then a few years later, the person who fulfilled the PI role left the institution. So we had a lot of turnover related to that, as well as turnover in like project coordinators. You can't avoid turnover. It's going to happen, especially with grants that go on as long as these do. So I think that's something that if I were to do things over again, we'd have like more intentional processes for how we would deal with that turnover.
Thank you. Reed, anything to add on that?
Just to echo that same situation. So when I thought about this question in advance, the biggest challenge we've had is people, the initial points of contact leaving. And so that becomes, then the new person comes in and they're not as enthusiastic, or they don't want to do it, or they want to move in a different direction, or whatever the situation. So that was hard. We had to re-justify, revalidate, reestablish a new partnership with someone who was not enthusiastic about, not that they were opposed to it, but they had other things they wanted to do. The other challenge we've had is people agreeing initially in the proposal phase, but then not recognizing the amount of work or the real impact that it would have on them or their office. And we live in Western Chicago. We live in a world where our enrollments are declining. And so when you have declining enrollments, that means staff positions sometimes aren't refilled. And so that means everybody gets bigger plates, right? So more stuff gets added, more stuff gets added. And so the original situation that the office manager or the chair or whatever agreed to has changed. So yeah, they have fewer people doing more work, and you're circling back and say, hey, remember that thing you promised that you would do for me? And they said, we can't do that anymore because we have fewer people and we're working, crazy hours as it is. Okay, but we promised NSF and we have these programming responsibilities. So navigating that has been a challenge. Yeah, I've gotten an acute sense that we are fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth on the priority list for some departments. Again, I'm thinking mostly internal partnerships rather than external. But venture that the same thing is true for the community colleges or two-year schools that we are partnering with. Even, two-year enrollments are declining around us. So that puts a little bit more stress into everybody's day. But at the end of the day, you deliver the programming, you get the students through their program, they get them to graduation, and life moves on. But it has taken more work even than I expected, adapting to that situation. So that's what I've got.
Yeah, thanks. Turnover seems to be an issue, and declined enrollment as well. Awesome. What about student attrition? Yeah. Has that been a challenge for you all?
Recruitment is tough. I don't know about y'all, but recruitment of students too is really a challenge, and that's partly due to fewer of them, but also getting the students just to apply for the scholarship is like pulling teeth. I don't know why. I know it's not just my project. Every NSF meeting I've been to, all the PIs talk about it. So it's surprising. Maybe easier now that the cap is 15K rather than in my situation, the cap is at 10K per scholarship. But still, it's hard to get students in the door.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say so regarding recruitment, I know at the start of the grant, there was a strong push to recruit from high schools. So the PIs visited at least like 16 or 17 different
Yeah.
high schools that fed into our different institutions and had like a high population of underrepresented minority students. Um, Later on in the grant, recruitment really, I have to give kudos to our Southeast Community College in Western Nebraska folks because they put in a lot of effort to recruit. Um, and they did a phenomenal job. And it was still, I mean, it was tough to get applicants. Something that we did end up shifting in the grant. So I had mentioned how um, we like our goal was transfer, but we found that there were several students, particularly at Southeast Community College, who were a part of like a computing intensive program and didn't really have a desire to transfer to UNL. And so we kind of shifted our focus to still like support those students. And this was part of a conversation with the program officer as well. Um, uh, but we had like a recognition internally as a team that uh, the students that we were supporting, we weren't necessarily like going to push them into transfer if they didn't want to. And that was kind of, I think, a implicit expectation of the grant at the beginning. But we shifted.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we have to pivot sometimes. Thanks both for those great insights. One final remark and take maybe half a minute for each one of you. What's one actionable piece of advice you would offer an STEM team that is looking to expand their reach and impact through external partnership? Very briefly, please.
Rachel, you want to go? I can go.
I can go ahead. Yeah, so I think to emphasize like finding ways to recognize folks that you are partnering with, I think is really, really valuable to maintain that partnership and expand to other connections. Finding ways to honor the expertise that folks on your team have. Um, and I think I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, my 2 cents is be willing to share ownership of the project. That's when you, and another way of phrasing that is to give before you take. If you lead with the ask, the answer will probably be no. So be genuine in your inclusion of your partners and recognize their priorities, their limitations, their resources, their distractions, everything else. Um, and be willing, if as much as you can, to incorporate their situation into yours, rather than assuming that they will adapt to whatever institutional or program or project constraints that you've generated in your proposal. Work with them and say, what are your, considerations, priorities, constraints? So, be willing to share ownership means to give up some control or give up some of your grand vision in order to accommodate alternative or partner views. And I think that ultimately will strengthen things because the goal, one of the outcomes of the USM project should be ideally, is that the partnerships live on beyond the length of the grant. in the project. So for that living on to occur, there needs to be a genuine collaboration and genuine reciprocity that has been built, and using the STEM award as a spark for that. But the maintenance and the growth is up to you.
Thank you both for sharing your perspective and expertise on leveraging external partnership. We do appreciate you coming on today to share with us. And thanks everyone for attending. I know you took the time off your busy teaching schedule and some other things you had to leave behind, so we do appreciate you. We hope that you found the session informative, and we will ask you to please help us complete a short survey to let us know how the session went, and also if there are any future topics you want us to have a webinar on, please let us know. And thanks, Tara, for putting the link in the chat. Also, very quickly, on April 1st, we have Scholars Coffee and Conversation coming up. The topic is on time and stress management. Tara has just put the link to that meeting in the chat. Please encourage your scholars to come. We'll have 3 STEM scholars who will kick off the session by sharing their perspective and experience on the topic. So encourage them to come and learn from their peers. And finally, the scholars nomination is up. An email was sent, I think, a week or 2 ago. Please nominate your STEM scholars whom you'd like to attend the October 9th to 11th Scholars and PI meeting. Each institution or each STEM award can nominate up to 10 scholars. So please make sure that you do that and coordinate with our project team, because you're only supposed to submit 1 nomination form for each award. So please do that. And thanks, Tara, so much for putting the links in the chat. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon. Please connect with us through our socials, through the AAAS STEM Rec website. And we'll set the recording in a few days, as well as just a summary of this conversation, so that if you want to refer it in the future, you have it in a written form. Thank you again for taking the time to be with us this afternoon. Have a great rest of your day.